Hello and welcome to another edition of GreenFleet Talks. My name's Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. And I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Dinage, Head of Partnerships at ElecrAssure. Hi, Tom.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
Tom, I've got to ask, so your job description is Head of Partnerships at ElecrAssure. So what does that involve and who is ElecrAssure partnering with?
Cool. So title, essentially all things commercial. So sales, marketing. I think I listened to the Diary of the CEO, Stephen Bartlett, and he's very much all about how partnerships in business should be a mutual thing instead of sort of selling. And I agree with him. So we went with Head of Partnerships because we sort of understand that a lot of our customers are at the start of their EV transition. And if we do a good job, then we're going to be a long-term partner. And I think that's a really good way of building a sustainable business and growing at a nice, steady rate.
Thank you, Tom. Absolutely the perfect answer. And in this day and age, these things really do have to be partnerships. So my first question for you, obviously you're working with a lot of businesses, but what are the most common pitfalls that companies come across when they're installing fleet or workplace charging infrastructure?
I'd say number one challenge is going to be power availability to site. It's great knowing what vehicles you need to sort of transfer over to electric. You've chosen your charging infrastructure, you've chosen your installation partner. What no one can do until they sort of got onto site to evaluate is what power you've got available, when it's available. So obviously when your business is using that power, and then do you need more? It seems to be quite a common challenge. And the solution is not a simple one. So when you need more power, you can apply technical solutions to use what's available at different times of the day or night via software and hardware. But generally, it's just a case of there isn't enough for the sort of entire use. So you need to get a power upgrade via a DNO. And it's a tricky, slow process that not many people are used to. So we have a fair amount of experience doing it. So we like to take that off our customers' plates and sort of do that work for them. And then the experience we have with the DNOs is that their pricing is generally quite high and the timescales can be quite long, which scares customers. And also it's a really hard thing to forecast before because they probably weren't aware of it as an issue. And then when we present that this is the cost and this is the timescale, it can really challenge the sort of the whole program and plans.
Yeah.
So
and it is good to be aware of that because, as you've already said, this is not an uncommon problem. No, but there was a change last year to the DNOs, wasn't there? Which now means that the amount that they can charge has been not capped, but they can't charge for the entire cost of the upgrade.
Yes, those changes have been made in legislation. We haven't seen change in real life experience, if I'm perfectly honest with you, for customers. What we can do is obviously you get a contestable element and a non-contestable element, and non-contestables is exactly what it is. There's nothing you can do. That is what it is. Yeah. But the contestables, you can work with IDNOs to get a lower cost. Also, you can get asset values to get return on the investment for customers. And it also can give a customer a bit more flexibility and improve timescales. So yeah, again, at ElecrAssure, we do that work for our customers because it's not fun. And if you've got a constant working relationship with different ICPs and IDNOs, it can make that relationship quicker and easier for a customer who at the end of the day is probably a mutual customer for both at that point.
Yeah. IDNOs is independent network operators, aren't they? So they're effectively doing the job of the distribution network operator, but it's a private company that you're working with.
Correct. Yes. And they're generally regionalized. So if you're in the industry like we are, you can have certain relationships in different industries. So when a customer says to you, oh, look, I've got 30 sites all around the UK, it's quite a daunting challenge if you were to explain to them what they need to do themselves. Whereas we can sort of go, well, hold on, we've got these existing relationships. We can do that work for you. and then come back and present how much money we were able to save you from that original D&O sort of proposal, and also the timescales that we can sort of give customers control over, which I think is a real big thing in terms of how they forecast and plan their strategy for EV transition.
Yep. Interesting. And are there any other pitfalls or barriers that you've come across?
Yeah, there's a few. I think a real common one for us is there's a lot of people out there who are happy to install hardware, apply some software, but then they leave customers without a sort of a post-installation maintenance package, which if you're operating a fleet is almost the most important thing, because when that charger goes down, and believe me, they all have issues. There's no perfect charger solution out there, especially when humans are involved. You need someone who's going to be able to be responsive to get out to your site and make sure your charger is operational, because if it's a critical operational vehicle, you need that reliability and almost that guarantee of service, because we're moving away from diesel and petrol, which is pretty reliable and robust in that sense.
Yeah, and so I've definitely come across this. And the other thing that strikes me is quite often those maintenance packages are for 3 years or up to 3 years. Well, that's fine if you're only planning on running that infrastructure for 3 years, or if you're only having the vehicles for 3 years. But in reality, you also need to be sure that whoever's providing that service is going to continue to maintain those charge points for the life of them, because I've come across so many charge points that are out of service, and the original installer doesn't want anything to do with them.
Yeah, I feel like you're almost plugging ElecrAssure for us there, Kate. You need somebody who's been around the industry for, I don't know, 10 years.
Yeah.
I think it's a good point. How much a fleet manager can predict that at the time is a hard one. I guess you can trust that they've got experience and valid sort of credentials that for existing customers they've worked with, and that's probably the due diligence you can do at that stage with a sort of a relationship, shall we say.
Yeah.
I think probably the final hurdle, and is probably a very fair one to mention, is the cost of the EV transition. I think transitioning to, if you lease or purchase your vehicles, at the moment it's currently a higher starting price. The cost of running the vehicles is lower, which is great. A lot of companies are receiving increased insurance bids everywhere, but for electric vehicles specifically, they're seeing a difference in insurance costs. And obviously, you have to install the right infrastructure. And I think if you're a commercial business and you've got mission critical or operational vehicles, you don't want to go for the cheapest option, because I've seen a lot of redundant electric vehicle chargers in car parks that no longer work. We have a lot of customers who come to us saying, we had it installed 2-3 years ago, it no longer works, we can't work as a business. So I don't think cheapest is best, and therefore to do it correctly, EV charging infrastructure isn't cheap. So there are some sort of grants out there available. There's workplace charging, there's a few, and there's also different ways of funding and financing this. So ElecrAssure, we like to give customers a leasing option to help with their capex sort of expenditure, because obviously budgets aren't going to have huge amounts of reserves for the EV sort of transition, especially as we've still got people who are quite in the early adoption phase. So there's a number of challenges. They'd be my top 3, I think.
Yeah. Okay. And the financing one is very interesting, because I kind of think that's going to change as we see different types of fleets moving to electric. A lot of the early movers, these big companies, it's embedded within their core values, their CSR, if they're utilities or they've made a public pledge, the money is there to do it. But for these smaller businesses, as we get closer to 2030, as we get closer to 2035, I think this ability to lease the charging infrastructure and amortize that over the life of the vehicles is going to make a big difference. So watch this space, I think. Let's talk.
We're gearing towards a general election year, so these things are likely to be moved or amended or edited or window dressed. However, it's a tricky one for a fleet manager to keep on top of. I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No. I agree with you. It is, the politics in the background doesn't help a great deal. So let's have a talk about the public charging network. What do you see are the common issues around that?
Yeah.
And do you foresee that the charge point regulations that are coming in, or that came in 2023, are addressing these issues?
Yeah, so public charging it's not an area we specialize in terms of we don't operate public charging. I've been on the receiving end of public charging. I was living sort of last year in a house where I didn't have a driveway, so I couldn't have a home charger, and I relied on public charging. It's inconsistent, it can be frustrating, and also it can be really expensive. So that was probably my experience, and I think the difference when we talk to customers in a commercial environment, it's a bit of a non-starter in terms of you can't forecast, you can't plan. And I appreciate there's some companies out there who are sort of doing some great work towards improving that. But the commercial discussions we have now with customers is that they don't want to rely on that system, especially some of our truck customers. They just don't feel. I think there's like one truck public EV charging space that's sort of suitable, which the number one doesn't sound great, does it? So it's certainly a challenge for our customers, and I think it's just a bit of a non-starter, which, to be fair, probably keeps me in a job, because if it was amazing and great, we wouldn't be doing that much work, would we?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and it is all about the ability to control, isn't it? And a lot of fleets, are highly optimized and have very tight schedules throughout the day that they need to adhere to. So you can't afford to get to a charge point and then have to queue for maybe 10 or 15 minutes while you're waiting for a slot to become free. And you're right. I mean, with trucks, the problem isn't so much the technology, because it's largely the same, up to 350 kilowatts. It's the size of the spaces and the locations of them. A lot of the larger electric vehicles simply can't manage in them. That will change, of course. And what about the announcement last year about the ZEV mandate being pushed back now to 2035? What kind of impacts do you foresee for fleets and the wider industry?
Yeah, I'm not going to add any personal opinions on this. I'll just tell you exactly how our customers have reacted, and it's had zero difference on their plans. I think there's quite a lot of sort of messaging that if Labour win the next general election, they will reverse it back to 2030. But I just, for the fleet managers and the sort of the people who are planning the next 2-3 years of their fleet infrastructure, they're not planning to go diesel anymore. They're planning to phase out their diesel vehicles to electric. And we haven't seen any sort of decline in that transition. It seems to be a really steady growth, which is great, because businesses are wanting to make a positive impact to the planet, environment, and that's a brilliant thing. And also the consistent sort of cost savings, they're growing, and that gap will always attract the investment that, rightly warrants sort of all the CSR and the green environmental impact, which is positive of what business world can have on the UK.
Yeah, Tom, I'm glad that's what you're seeing. I'm glad that's what you're hearing, and long may it continue, because certainly we don't want to be dependent on our politicians to set the agenda for this.
I'm sure there's some good ones out there.
Yeah. No, but I mean, really, this is within our own grasp, isn't it? I think it's the thinking. Tom, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'd like to thank you very much for your insight today, and thank you, of course, to ElecrAssure for joining GreenFleet Talks.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I think it's lovely to be part of the sort of the GreenFleet family and the environment that you guys are setting. It's a really important thing that you do. So yeah, we're really proud to be part of the sort of the sustainability industry. And yeah, we look forward to doing more work with you.
Oh, thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure. That is about all we've got time for. Thank you for watching, and tune into GF365 again soon.